Well, welcome to Expert Views on ADR Ever, a podcast about simplifying the traditional African method of settling disputes or the appropriate dispute resolution ADR in a bid to attract more users to settle their disputes or conflicts with ombuds, collaborative law, mediation, arbitration, restorative justice, adjudication, negotiation, conciliation, early dispute resolution, and of course, early neutral evaluation. My name is ChiNweEgbunike, Marketing Liaison, Ombuds Day 2024, American Bar Association Dispute Resolution, and the host of Expert Views on ADR Ever video podcast show. I'm delighted to welcome Tina Patterson to the Ever show. She is a principal at Jade Solutions LLC, a woman minority-owned small business. Tina brings more than 20 years of experience providing consulting services in the areas of proposal management and grants and management support, alternative dispute resolution, facilitation, and conflict coaching support to a wide range of clients. She is the co-chair of the American Bar Association section on dispute resolutions, public disputes, and consensus building committee. In 2021, Tina was elected the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators North American Branch Vice Chair of Programs. Tina wears many hats, so I've left the link to her profile below. Welcome to the show, Tina. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Dr. Chinwe. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, same here. So without further ado, the first question is, what is ADR and does it present a suitable mechanism for advancing discrimination, bullying, and harassment in the workplace?
So alternative dispute resolution is intended to be a means to resolve a dispute instead of going to court. And I think of alternative dispute resolution as being a continuum. And I tell the public, as you move along that continuum, your participation, that is you, the person bringing the dispute forward, your involvement diminishes as we continue along that continuum going to court. So the first stop along that continuum is mediation. And that is really one of the best mechanisms for resolving disputes regarding discrimination, bullying, because you literally are working with the mediator to come up with a resolution, with a solution that is mutually agreed upon. We transition from there to some more adjudicated models. And what I mean by that is somebody else is making the decision. And oftentimes one of those models that we talk about is arbitration. And arbitration is, instead of me helping the parties to come up with a solution, I'm now rendering a decision. And I tell people the involvement is diminishing, but between mediation and arbitration is a mechanism that I really like and I think is most appropriate is an ombuds. Okay. And the ombuds literally has that opportunity to do the intake and work with the person and say, here are the options that are available. Here are the pros and cons of each option. You determine what you would like to pursue. The ombuds role is not to render a decision, but to make the options available and to inform the person who's come forward with the complaint. Here's how this works. Here's how mediation works. Here's how arbitration works. If you decide that you were going to file with an outside mechanism, and in the US, that could be the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission or going through a local jurisdiction, the ombuds can explain that. The other reason I like ombuds, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, I'm hoping, is the reporting mechanism for the ombuds within the organization. I'll stop there. I know that I've said a lot, but
sorry, what did you say? I didn't get the last word for the ombuds.
The ombuds, as far as the intake with the ombuds and where they report, the reporting structure within an organization is different.
Okay, thank you so very much. So what are the laws and regulations in place in the US, the employer's legal obligations to prevent them address such behaviors when they occur?
Well, there are a number of laws in place. The first one that comes to mind is the Equal Opportunities.
The
Equal Opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Laws. And the next law that comes into mind, it's actually an act, is the Americans with Disability Act. That is for individuals who have a disability, whether they have identified it or told the employer. If they ask for an accommodation, the employer should try to attempt to address the accommodation. There's also the Family Law Act, or Family Medical Law Act, and that is for individuals who need to take time off, either because they have a sick family member or they in turn need to take time off. There's also the, and I'm going to call it by its acronym because I don't remember what it actually stands for, but it's the ADEA, and that is regarding age. So a person over, in this case, it's generally individuals over in protected classes. So those individuals over the age of 40, minorities, those would be in protected classes. And it is important that employers don't discriminate based on age, based on gender, or based on other identifying factors. But those are the primary laws that employers look to and that employees look to as well.
So to what extent do employees know that they can, opt for ADR in the US?
That's a good question. So some employers in the employment contract will have a clause regarding resolving disputes.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of employers immediately jump to arbitration, which I think is a mistake, because before you get to arbitration, you could actually resolve the dispute or resolve the problem through mediation, and sometimes just having a conversation. But usually employees find out, and it's in fine print, and I tell people, look at your employment contract. What does it say? There's a dispute resolution clause in there. And the dispute resolution clause will also state when you file your dispute and you decide that you want to move forward with having it adjudicated, or that the complainant, the person bringing the complaint for it, is responsible for attorney's fees, which can be overwhelming because oftentimes employers have a bank of attorneys and people don't realize that until they go back and look at that contract. So it's usually in the employee contract.
Okay, thank you so very much. So what common barriers do employees face when reporting such behaviors?
Yes. So for employees, the biggest concern is retaliation.
Hmm.
And employees will oftentimes not report. Before I met with you today, I wanted to double check a statistic. I wrote a paper in 2021 regarding workplace bullying, and the numbers have increased. So 49% of individuals in the US, or I should say employees, reported workplace bullying. That's a rise, or sorry, there's been an increase or rise in the number of workplace bullying incidents since 2017, a 57% increase. You would think that with the advent of working remotely or virtually that it would decrease. Actually, it's increased more. But the biggest concern is retaliation. The second concern is what will the process look like? Who can the person go to and actually present their complaint in a way that they would actually be heard? Retaliation is usually the biggest concern.
Thank you so very much. So what cultural nuances aid and abet discrimination, bullying, and harassment in the workplace?
Would you repeat the first part of the question, please?
Sorry, did you?
Would you repeat the first part of the question?
I said, what cultural nuances aid and abet discrimination, bullying, and harassment in the workplace? Thank you.
Oh, Dr. Chinwe, that alone could be a discussion because we now have a workforce. We have people who are working in sectors that were primarily either all male or considered all female, or people with certain education level. We now have intergenerational conflict. We now have individuals who are coming in. I've used myself as an example. I provide arbitration services. Arbitration historically has been a white male, primarily white male sector. Coming in, sometimes it can, and I'm not saying anything about my colleagues, but sometimes the parties that I come into contact with are not expecting me.
Mm.
And they quickly learn that I'm not leaving unless I've done something wrong in the hearing process. But it's all of those factors. It's gender, it's age. People have with more fluid opportunities to travel. We see discrimination based on origin and nationality, what is perceived to be language. I live in Maryland, and the county that I live in, we sometimes hear about discrimination based on health, and that's more if someone is known to have, say, sickle cell anemia. Sometimes it becomes a concern for the employee. So there's a lot of factors, and ADAA and the Americans with Disability Act can sometimes address that. And I mentioned sickle cell, but also individual diabetes. Most recently, there's been discussions about obesity and obesity shaming, obesity as a way of bullying or causing someone to be the victim of what I would call a dignity violation. So employers are being told, stop with the weight loss contest, because for those who are of a certain weight or body mass index, we don't know why, and we don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable or feel like they're not included in the work.
Exactly. Well, thank you so very much for that, Tina. So I want to ask a personal question. So have you experienced bullying, discrimination, or harassment in your workplace?
Oh, Dr. Chinwe, the answer is yes.
Oh.
So there's 2 instances. The first time it was sexual harassment.
Oh, sorry.
The first time it was sexual harassment.
Okay.
The second time it was workplace bullying. And I should be clear, workplace bullying is not illegal in the United States as it is in some other countries.
Oh. That's sense. So it's not illegal. Oh, really? Okay, thank you.
We'll talk a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, okay. So how were they handled when you reported? Did you report, or you just carried on as if nothing happened?
With the sexual harassment incident, I had to report it. I had been transferred to a new manager who had made inappropriate comments and was making it difficult for me to perform the essential duties of my job. And I found out quickly that the company that I worked for had an employee relations department. They did intake and did the investigation. I can say this, and this was in the early 2000s, late 1990s. Yeah. Processes have gotten better. I think in my instance, the employee relations department failed because everybody in the department knew about the investigation and it was not kept confidential. So I had people coming up to me asking, "Are you okay?" Another supervisor said, "Why didn't you tell me what was going on?" And it just, it became very uncomfortable. I was moved to another supervisor, and I'm sitting in a meeting, and you can tell people are what the whispering
can
is.
Imagine.
So good with the workplace bullying, because it's not illegal in the U.S. It literally becomes a matter of, are you talking about disparate treatment? And is it disparate treatment of people who are similarly situated? In my case, other people on my team started to notice that I was being treated differently by my supervisor, and they said, "What's going on?" And then we had another supervisor from another department. She said, "I'm concerned about you. Your manager is rough on you, and you're doing everything that she asked you to do." In the end, we had to bring in legal action. And we found out that internally within the organization, I was terminated under false pretenses. And the attorney for the company that I had worked for talked with my supervisor and the person that she reported to, and said, "Don't ever do that again. She could sue us big time. All she's asking for is a package, and so that was the outcome for me. I can tell you, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, and I think it's one of your questions. One of the biggest challenges in this space is to have a circle of support when you're going through the process.
Oh, thank you so very much. So, So how, after reporting, of course, you felt, well, how was the environment? I think you mentioned everyone knew about what was going on. So was it conducive, or were you ostracized?
It's not conducive at all.
Mhm.
In instances of workplace bullying and harassment, there's productivity loss.
Mm,
The person who's filed the complaint is often under stress.
I
Um,
know.
there, oftentimes there's concerns regarding performance. They may be feeling like they're under scrutiny. People will sometimes take off time from work, or they'll just, because they're so under so much duress, they'll
Yeah.
just, I don't, just not want to participate. In my case, I started shutting down at
Hmm.
work. So when we had meetings, I didn't want to talk during meetings. I generally worked late. I stopped
Yeah.
working late. I would leave. As soon as it started to get dark, I would leave because I didn't want to be
Oh,
around this other
wow.
supervisor. I stopped coming in on the weekends to work. Yes, it can have physical as well as mental consequences for the person.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. So I think you mentioned retaliation. So the HR department or your managers, organizational leaders protected you from retaliation from your employers.
So by law, an employer is supposed to protect an employee from retaliation.
Okay.
It is up to the employee to let someone know when the retaliation is taking place. In my case, I was moved to another supervisor.
Yeah.
Sometimes that opportunity is not available, in which
Okay.
case there either needs to be an internal, another approach, either checking in with someone. And I know we mentioned HR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's important to understand the role of HR. Um, HR's function is primarily to keep an organization, corporation, to help them avoid lawsuits. They are not there to help the employee necessarily.
Mm,
So smart organizations usually have both an HR function, human resources function, and an employee relations function, which would be
mm,
the person who would stand in and come and say, why don't you come and meet with me weekly? How are things going? And checking in.
mm,
Because the human resources department is outward facing. They
yeah.
are making sure that the paperwork's been done to comply with the laws. If they see a possible opportunity for the law to be broken or breached, they're going to advise this is the action that you should take. The employee relations is going to try to work to resolve the issue and come up with options. So, and the same is true for an employee assistance program if
Mm,
there is one. So that distinction is important. In
yeah.
the past, companies would have had just an HR department, and I find oftentimes the HR department is not best suited to handle these types of matters.
Mm,
Just because they're biased, and
yeah.
when I say by bias,
Yeah.
their perspective is I've got to protect the organization.
Yeah.
And by protecting the organization, they may also be protecting the person who is considered the wrongdoer. In this case, if it's a supervisor that is harassing someone,
Yeah.
that's not what you want. You want to try to adjudicate. I keep saying the word adjudicate, but you want to try to resolve so that
Yeah.
the company is held in the best light possible and it's a safe working space.
Mm. Oh, thank you so very much. So, how can organizations or higher education or institute create a safe culture of inclusion and diversity that would encourage employees to speak up when they experience such behaviors?
Feedback mechanism is crucial. To
Yeah.
have an inclusive workspace, it is crucial that employees know that if they provide input or if there's a whistleblower, meaning you anonymously, that action is taken. It doesn't have to be broadcast far and wide, but the employee should know that one, that anything that's reported is taken seriously. Anything that is reported will be acted upon in a timely manner, that and also that it will be done in a discreet way. One of again, back to this retaliation, Dr. Chinwe, if you were having a problem in the office and I anonymously report it, I don't want to see in the employee newsletter that Tina Patterson has reported. It should be done discreetly and it should be done as expeditiously as possible.
Yeah.
That one will encourage employees to speak up. And when they see that action is taken, and action can be encouraging training of supervisors, it could be saying we're now making policy changes. It could be implementing programs that talk about what's appropriate conversation in the workplace, what's appropriate treatment, how do you have difficult conversations. Those are mechanisms that can be put in place that would allow employees to come forward and feel that they can do so without fear of retribution or retaliation.
Oh, thank you so very much. So in creating safe spaces for employees, how can ADR be used as a safe space or encourage better reporting for for occurrences of bullying, discrimination, and harassment?
This is where teaching supervisors, senior leadership, and those who are moving into senior leadership about the active listening. Employing active listening. And active listening does not mean that you have to respond to everything that someone says to you. And understanding what a feedback mechanism is. Asking for feedback and providing constructive feedback. This is not the opportunity to tear someone down, to make them feel that they've lost face. These are ways in which you can literally help with people feeling comfortable and speaking up and saying, I feel comfortable. And also talking about, if you don't feel comfortable talking to Tina Patterson, here's the next person in the process. If your issues with Tina, go to Dr. Chinwe. You can't talk to Dr. Chinwe, who else can you talk to?
Yeah.
And literally making it clear that the door is open, that you will be heard without judgment, without repercussion.
Well, thank you so very much, Tina. This has been a masterclass. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and perspective and the learning you shared with us today. And I believe that employers would embrace all you have stated here and look for avenues to create safe spaces via ADR. And of course, to encourage more employees to come up, to step forward and report such behaviors whenever the need arises. And of course, potential users to embrace all you have stated about the benefits associated with ADR mechanisms, and of course, opt for ADR whenever the need arises. Thank you so very much for agreeing to come on the show. I'm so very grateful.
Dr. Chinwe, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I hope
Same here.
chat with you again.
Same here. All right, take good care of yourself. Bye. Cheers.